starting a business, becoming an entrepreneur is an uphill battle. Without purpose, we don't have clarity, we don't have sight, and we might end up losing ourselves in that magic, that energy that we all have, because now we start to focus on the thing, the product or the service.
Today, we are joined by Greg Witz. He's an entrepreneur, thought leader, a published author. He blends psychology and communication with a no BS approach to coaching and leadership.
Self-awareness, it's a very difficult topic because it requires us to acknowledge why we're great. It also requires us to acknowledge and see why we're not so great, where our dysfunction is. And that's a little bit of what we're always going to have to do as entrepreneurs, right? We're going to really have to sit down and say, hey, does this make me great? Does this make me better? Am I cut for this? And if so, yes. If not,
Greg, welcome to the show.
Jeff, amazing to be here. Very excited. As you were saying, we had an opportunity to chat before on my show, and now I want to come back and share as much thoughts and gems as I can on yours.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of going to pick up where we left off on your show because we were so aligned, so like-minded. And I just have to sort of broadly comment, the number of times that I start off a conversation, like a second conversation with somebody on my show or sometimes on their show, because you do a lot of these swaps, right? Right. And I'm always like, yeah, it feels like we're going to pick right back up where we left off because we were so aligned, or we hit a a really resonant point or something. Like, I've just come to believe there's a lot of really, really like smart, sane, creative, driven, just very impressive and inspiring people in the world. And I think we live in a world where that point probably doesn't get made often enough. Like, there's a lot of really awesome people, and it's awesome that we get to be in a business where we get to talk with them. But yeah, I think my faith in humanity has generally been uplifted by the abundance of really amazing conversations that I've been fortunate to have. And I'm counting you among that. So anyway, I just wanted to make that comment.
I agree. I think the last couple of years does put a dimming on maybe your optimism when it comes down to people and humans, and being able to, through these types of shows and the work that we do, being exposed to all these other individuals like yourself and many others, again, it's motivating and lifting. And I think it's important that, we as human beings, we all have a ripple effect, right? And one of the most important things we could do is be conscious of that. Like, what am I going to do to impact in a positive way? What am I going to do to send this ripple effect out in a way which is going to inspire people or help people or support people? And they're going to do it, and they're going to do it, and they're going to do it, kind of like pay it forward. So no, I appreciate that observation. Well,
so let's talk about it a little bit. One of the things that I do sort of neurotically, and I'm actually picking it up because I do it so much I don't even know where I land anymore, is I redo my Instagram bio, because I'm still trying to figure out the exact words that I use to basically state who I am to the world. Like, this is this endless revision process, right? And one of the themes that I tend to circle around because the thing I like about an Instagram bio, about like your bio and social media, and different platforms have different character counts that they allow. So some force more brevity than others. Like, you can be more long-winded on LinkedIn than on Instagram in terms of how you present to the world. I like these really, really short spaces that force me to distill, like, who the hell am I, right? Like, what is my main, like, I have a lot of things. I'm a multidimensional, complicated human like all of us, but like, what is my main thing? And one of the things that pops up again and again, I find, is this idea that capitalism is the solution. Mm-hmm. It's not the problem. Mm-hmm. But we live in a world that there's a large vein of society that really thinks that capitalism, and I think this is cyclical. Like, people don't remember the scourge of communism. They don't remember the scourge of fascism. Like, that generation's not making the calls anymore. And we've gotten kind of soft and a little bit, probably ignorant, but like, there's a strong anti-capitalistic mentality in the world right now. And I think that's appalling. But the reason I'm bringing this up in light of what we were just saying is that I actually think capitalism done properly forges the best human beings. And obviously you're in the better human business, and you do it a lot through business. And I interview a lot of different types of people, but probably predominantly entrepreneurs and business people and capitalists on my show. And I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the phenomenal human beings that I encounter come straight out of the world of business. And I think that itself defies a certain stereotype. And I wonder if you could click on that with me and talk a little bit about how because I see you doing it, using business to forge better humans and using humans to forge better business.
Right. I think the whole concept of capitalism, or whatever we want to label, there's always anti-something, right? There's always a group out there or individuals that want to be anti-anything. In fact, there's an amazing valedictorian speech by Tim Minchin. Do you know who Tim Minchin is? He's a comedian or an actor. I'll try to put it up later. Anyways, giving a valedictorian speech to University of Australia, and giving 9 tips to what these kids can do to be successful going out. So it's an awesome speech. And to the audience, you got to go YouTube this Tim Minchin UWA speech.
Yeah, I just found it. I typed in Tim Minchin valedictory speech and it popped right up. 9 life lessons.
Correct. And one of those was we have to stop being anti everything. You don't have to, you don't have to be an artist to hate science. You don't have to be a scientist to hate art. You don't have to hate Coldplay in order to, be this. You don't have to be anti cars in order to. So, and it was a really important lesson or message that he was sending, which is sometimes we're spending too much time focusing on what I'm going to fight and kick against. And, back to capitalism, without capitalism, we wouldn't be here. Like the world wouldn't be progressing the way it is. I mean, just think about this as an entrepreneur where you go out, you start a business, you hire people, you now start to provide back into the economy. Without that business and without that business being able to generate more and more and more and more and more, then you wouldn't be able to support the teams and the employees and the mouths and the families. And I say this to a lot of people, like this one business supports financially a lot of people. Like people are reliant on my particular business or your particular business. And if my business went away or my business was unable to generate the cash flow to put back in as an investment, to hire more, to evolve, there's a lot of people, there's that ripple effect again, which comes out in a negative way. So, the most important part, and I woke up one day, because I used to be anti-sales, right? I was like, we don't sell, right? Because we're just pure. We're really pure in the work that we do. We're pure coaches, we're pure trainers, and we will build it and they will come. And that took us so far. But then that didn't get us to the place that we needed to go in order to continue to thrive as a business, right? And, not that the fact that money is everything, but, money very much contributes and helps and is able to put back in a lot of different ways. Specifically, once again, as an entrepreneur, if you've got that mentality where it's like, all right, as we're growing or as we're building, we're growing, as we're growing, we're reinvesting, as we're reinvesting, we're getting better talent. As we're getting better talent, I'm surrounding myself with better golfers. As I'm playing with better golfers, we're making a bigger impact. And that all comes down to getting rid of this position of capitalism is bad, or sales is bad, or marketing is bad, or, science is bad, or the arts is bad, or once again, Coldplay is bad, right? Which they're not.
No, they're not. They're an amazing band. And it's funny because I have an ad that ran for a long time on YouTube that I filmed in a Coldplay shirt. And literally half the comments we got on the ad were just people hating on my shirt.
Right. Right. And think about this. I mean, to all these individuals and to the audience out there, I mean, the amounts of energy we exert, we expend or we put out in regard to some of this negativity. Think about if you just flip that script a little bit. Think about if like all of a sudden it wasn't so much emphasis and energy in regard to being anti this and smashing that down and this side's bad. And if you're on the right side, you're wrong. If you're on the left side, you're wrong. And in a lot of cases, this might be sort of part of the problem in the world today, which is people are too quick to move onto a position or a side, and then at this point, the argument becomes they start to argue with backwards logic. People say things, well, that's just the way you look at it. And it's like, well, how do you end up in a dialogue? Back to your Instagram handle. And as you were saying that, I'm thinking I got to update mine. But one of the things that I changed last year, or about a year and a half ago, was one of the lines said, what do I do besides president and podcasts and this and this and this and this? I'm encouraging dialogue. Because once we have dialogue and once we're in that circle, once with that conversation, but the dialogue around that, the willingness to listen and debate, the willingness to change your perspective, your point of view, the willingness to press your point or opinion or position. But we do so in a way which is, I'm going to receive and I'm going to exchange. And if I could live in that circular dialogue, right, then, at this point, we're not even talking about whether, anti-capitalism or capitalism. It's not about good or bad, right? It's about what we're doing and how we're doing it. So maybe the conversation needs to be more around, or maybe the question now needs to be more not, is it bad? Is it good? But, what are we doing with that? How are we utilizing this business to contribute and to give back? And I don't know one business owner, right, out of the world, and I travel the world and I work with a lot of different industries and a lot of business. I have yet to meet a human being, a business owner, an entrepreneur that is evil. Flat, bottom line. And to the audience, that there's no Dr. Evils hiding in these businesses, right? Every single person that I know that I interact with in business literally wakes up in the morning and says, what could I do to go and be great today, to be a good leader today, to run a great business today, to contribute, to build the business? And by definition, it's a selfless act, not a selfish act. Being an entrepreneur is being selfless, right? And being a capitalist is part of being that entrepreneur, which once again comes back down to being a selfless individual, right? Which is, what can I do to give others, to be others oriented?
So, and I think about, I'm sort of like pressure testing what you just said. I'm thinking, like, trying to go through my mind, every business owner, every entrepreneur I've ever known, like, I mean, and evil is a pretty strong word, but I would say there've been some that I don't know that I'd want to spend a lot of time with or hang out with or let them, sure, invite them over to my house. But in terms of, this sort of nefarious Bond villain type of capitalist or entrepreneur, I agree. So maybe as somebody yourself who spends a lot of time working inside the construct of business, maybe we can sort of identify, or you can talk about, where do you think the harm that businesses do, or the perceived harmful element of business, where do you think this is stemming from in terms of this it's really almost a cliche.
Right. It's a really good question. And the first thought that came to mind, which was like, the majority of people have been workers, right? Employees for a long time in history. In fact, school traditionally was built for that, which is how do we get, line workers coming into the factory? I think we're living in really exciting times now, which is for the first time, the tables really sort of flipped. And now all of a sudden I could, it's not just having a side hustle, it's I can actually go and create something and start a business. So I think for a long time, there's been this maybe a power struggle between the business owner or that business or that sort of institution against the rest of us. And it's going to take a little bit of time. This is where you think about from generations, like, in order for us to totally switch that landscape or that perspective, we're going to have more and more and more people starting businesses and taking those risks. And just to be very clear, not everyone should be a business owner. Not everyone should go and start a business, right? Some people are being.
I was going to say, I hear a lot of people say that. Well, not everyone's cut out to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone's cut out to be a professional athlete. Mm-hmm. But is there anybody that doesn't benefit from athletic training?
Agreed. Right.
And so in that same regard, maybe not everybody's cut out to be, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. But is there anybody in the world that isn't going to be challenged to grow and improve in really, really vital ways by starting a business? So I'm sort of challenging or questioning at least your statement that not everybody should be an entrepreneur. So is that a cliche, or is that something you've really thought through and believe?
So let me clarify that. Anyone can start a business, right? Anyone's got potential, right? Anyone can unlock their potential.
Thanks for the plug.
And move into that business, but that doesn't always necessarily that might not be the right decision for them. And I think we are living in a social media age right now where there is a lot of emphasis and social media hype on be an entrepreneur and start your business and, invest in crypto. And it's just, the danger in some of these things is it doesn't give us all the insight and the information for us to go and make that decision wisely. In other words, this, starting a business, becoming an entrepreneur is an uphill battle, right? It's a difficult thing. It's gonna bring a tremendous amount of stress in some capacity. There's going to be financial, maybe successes as well as challenges. There's, the people side, the marketing side. So, while everyone can do that and everyone will benefit from going and working that muscle, right? And they might get stronger. I think in a lot of cases, entrepreneurs, if we're doing this really well, is we're creating a business where we're attracting like-minded entrepreneurial thinkers, and you're giving them the ability to operate with autonomy, and you're giving them the ability to operate with independence and contribute and add to that village and add to that ship, right? So the question comes down to is, does the entrepreneurial mindset benefit people? 1,000%. Can they stretch and can they get stronger? 100. But once again, as we said, there are certain people that will be better suited and fitted for, call it being in quotations, that entrepreneur versus not.
So let me propose an analogy or maybe a metaphor and tell me if you agree with it. So my pushback premise to you was like, well, hey, it's kind of like getting in shape. Like everybody should do it. Everybody should take on physical, call it athletic training, whether or not you have the natural ability to be a world-class elite athlete or just a weekend warrior or just feel better than you did. Like everybody should still think of themselves as an athlete, and which references, I think this, and by the way, I think instinctively everybody agrees with that. And I think that's why Nike's mission is so powerful. You're probably familiar with Nike's mission statement, but it's like, something like equipping every athlete. And then it's like asterisk, if you have a body, you're an athlete, right? So I'm sort of putting forth this premise of like, would we equate that to like, if you have a mind, you're an entrepreneur, and that like, it might be circumstantially, my metaphorical premise is that circumstantially there are people that are too sick to engage in a regimen of physical training.
Correct.
3 days after you had quadruple bypass surgery, Jeff Lerner is not suggesting that you should be pushing yourself athletically.
Yeah, running up a mountain.
And so my question are there really people that would not grow and benefit from an entrepreneurial endeavor, or call it entrepreneurial training? Or is it analogous to the heart patient who it's just not their time? Like circumstantially, it's not their time. Only we happen to live in a world where, for purposes of the metaphor, the majority of people are so financially sick that they can't take the risk of what would otherwise be a very healthy training regimen called becoming an entrepreneur.
Right. I think it's a little bit of both. Let me share this. So right before we got on, I was just sending a text message to a friend in Washington, DC. We've been trying to connect. It's been playing that phone tag. And I just read the message and it's like, how are you? And gave me a little bit of an update on here's what's happening in life and here's what's happening with his kids. And by the way, his wife has just shut down her firm and she's joined a bigger firm. And it's so much better because there's less stress now and there's more financial security and they blah, 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 blah. So, and she's been running her firm for several years, but I know the story. The story is she's been a small firm. I don't know how well they've done financially. There is a lot of stress and pressure. And she just went, you know what? I'm not this athlete. I don't want to go and play this pro game. I'm not trying to get to that pro level. I would rather be part of the team, right? Which is, really well. And I said in my reply, hopefully it's got a little bit of that entrepreneurial feel in the bigger firm, because I think the danger in some of these things, and this is actually an interesting point, which is where does that company go from being entrepreneurial to more of now this enterprise sort of organization where it's bureaucracy and process and it's square, and we've become everything that we swore we weren't going to become as a business, but the business sort of took that life of its own, right? But hopefully it's got a little bit of that. On the opposite end, I used to have this kid work with me. He was my social and marketing guy, 23 years old. This kid was East Indian, just a killer when it came down to wanting to run his own thing. Anyway, he left me after 6 months. He's like, high five. I'm still very close with him, right? This was a few years ago. I was like, why are you leaving? He was like, I don't want to work for you or anything. I want to go do my own thing. And I was like, I will support you as long as I can. Right. So I think one of the things that maybe becomes important for us as human beings, and this is where like a lot of the work that I do, which is, understanding your personality and psychology and self-awareness. Self-awareness I've always said this, it's a very difficult topic because it requires us to acknowledge why we're great. It also requires us to acknowledge and see why we're not so great, where our dysfunction is. And that's a little bit of what we're always going to have to do as entrepreneurs, right? We're going to really have to sit down and say, hey, wait a minute, does this make me great? Does this make me better? Am I cut for this, right? Am I able to stretch and run in this environment? And if so, yes. If not, then we might have to look at other options.
So you said something that piqued my interest a lot when you talked about the point at which a business transitions from being entrepreneurial to, your term was enterprise, but I think you're sort of saying when it, and then you added some other adjectives, bureaucratic, maybe sort of like a little more impersonal, more corporate,
square.
Yeah. So I'm curious. You work with a lot of businesses, right? And of all different sizes. I've dug into your work. And so I'm curious, do you have any theories on where, why, and how that threshold exists? I have my own theories, but I want to hear yours. Where, why, and how that threshold exists. In other words, what is the inflection point where a business goes from entrepreneurial to and I actually am not going to use enterprise because I think you can be. My belief, or maybe it's my belief that I must hold to do what I do in the world, is that you can be very large, very enterprise, and still very entrepreneurial. But although more often than not, that doesn't play out. But I'm curious, what do you think is that danger zone that businesses cross over where, now they've got employees that are quietly quitting and morale is low and it just doesn't feel like it used to?
Yeah. So first, I just want to address the quiet quitting topic. This quiet quitting has been happening forever. It's not a new term. It's not a new thing, right? Right. If I was working at a job 20 years ago and I didn't like it, I wouldn't be verbal about that. I would show up physically every day doing whatever I need to do just to get by and trying to find something else as quickly as possible, right? Mm-hmm. So quietly quitting is not this new term, right? But when does this happen in a business? Maybe it's not when, maybe it has more to do with a company's purpose. I'm thinking about a client. They are 2.7 billion annual revenue right now. One of the most purposeful, driven organizations you will ever meet. And it doesn't matter whether you are speaking to the CEO all the way down to a maintenance person in a factory in India. If you ask those individuals, what is the purpose-driven strategy? What is the purpose of the organization? How does your purpose fit within that organizational's purpose? Everyone will rhyme it off, probably about 4,000 or 5,000 employees. And what that took was leadership. So maybe, again, it's not when this happens. Maybe it has to do with more the leadership that we have within these organizations and whether the leader in the organization is still driving for that purpose. And I know there's lots of books on purpose and Simon Sinek and the why and all these things. What I've come to believe is over recent years, without that purpose, we don't have clarity. We don't have sight. We don't know which way to go. And we might end up losing ourselves in losing that entrepreneurship or that thing, that magic, that energy that we all have, because now we start to focus on the thing, the product or the service, and just pushing that out. So I don't know if I've really answered your question or maybe just sort of added to a little more confusion, but I think it's a big question. What do you think? When do you think that happened?
I strongly agree, and I kind of lit up when you said purpose. what's interesting about the sort of the anti-capitalistic conversation or this, and I'm as somebody that goes on social media and overtly talks about prosperity, I sort of allied the personal and professional development conversation where I'm like, look, there's a lot of stuff you want to change about your life, but it's probably unrealistic to think that it's all going to play out the way you want unless you also figure out a way to make more money or change what you do to get money, or probably both, right? And I kind of call people out on that. And because I bring the financial piece into the conversation very directly, I get a fair amount of attacks that it's, that are sort of, I'll just sum up and say they're anti-capitalistic in nature. They're like money is bad, greed is bad, everybody just wants money. Everybody's want of money is what's ruining the world. And what I think is ironic about all of it is, and I think you just addressed it, an organization that has no outward purpose, in other words, a purpose of impact or a purpose of service to the market or the customer or the world at large, in the absence of that, their purpose is simply to exist, to perpetuate, and perhaps even to grow, but it's growth in a consumptive zero-sum way, right? Like they're for them to exist means to subtract from the world around for their own self-perpetuation, right? And a lot of the people that are angry at companies like that, there's a theory in psychology that we tend to have the most visceral emotional reactions to those things that we recognize in ourselves that we dislike. It's people that are pissed because they don't have a purpose other than to exist, and they want to be the ones taking, not giving.
Correct.
And they're angry at the business because the business is a mirror in which they can see themselves going, well, this is a bad business because it just wants to feed itself and to take from the world. And I don't like it because it's asking me when I want to be the one feeding myself and taking from the world. So I'm going to do less and try to get more.
Right.
And I think that it happens at the macro is at the business level, the micro is at the individual level, but it's the same thing. But when you get groups of people together that have purpose at both at the micro level, then they build companies at the macro level that also have purpose. And I agree. I actually totally agree with you. I think you nailed it. And those businesses never become shitty places to work. I mean, they may have hard days, but they're never bad days.
Yeah. And, back to the shitty places to work, we as either employees, team members, contributors, influencers, impactors, whatever you want to define yourself as, that's part of this group, this community, because now we could change the word business to community, right? Yeah. Like business is the ultimate community. And what is the purpose of that community? When I was a kid, I had a really cool experience where and it wasn't done involuntarily. I was shipped off to a kibbutz in Israel because my mother was like, we're shipping you off. We're getting you away from the friends and the environment and the stuff that you're doing because we see you tracking down a road with a group of people that it's probably going to be bad. And I didn't realize this so many years later, but the interesting thing about a kibbutz, and a kibbutz for just the audience, is communal living, right? And the kibbutz all works to produce something, and it's very neutral and shared and stuff. And, it might not be a place to live, but the concept of it is really interesting. And I thought about that as business as well, which is maybe this is what it is about, right? Like as business leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs, we have a responsibility to either build and start a community and grow that, or we have a responsibility to contribute to the well-being and the health of that community. And that community produces something which allows to earn, which allows us to, receive and gain as well. And the more we start to, as you were saying, the more we start to stop demonizing business, right? Because of my own insecurity, because let's say I grew up in a poor family and I've got this sort of unconscious thing of I hate money and no one should have money and money is very hard. And you've got this scarcity sort of mindset. This is an unconscious thing. And instead of that individual leaning into themselves and going, wait a minute, maybe it's my view that's wrong. Maybe me on this attack over here and this demonizing of this business, as you said, maybe it's not the business, maybe it's me. And also what we tend to do as human beings is we take this blanketing approach, right? We say every company is this big conglomerate and they're all nasty and they're all capitalists and they just want to tear the environment apart. Yeah, maybe there are certain businesses or places that don't operate in the best capacity, right? But that doesn't mean all businesses are that. That doesn't mean every entrepreneur is evil. And back to where we started this a little earlier, I have yet to meet an entrepreneur or business leader that wakes up in the morning and says, I want to do bad today. I want to go and mess things up.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm curious. I mean, I don't think I've ever, well, I'll just say this. Anybody that thinks that business owners are greedy and selfish, like, I promise you, there are easier ways to get ahead than starting a business. If I was greedy and selfish and you know, and I think that the counterpart of greediness is laziness, because, you know, I don't think it's greedy to say, hey, I'm producing massive value in the world. I am giving a ton. I'm making a huge impact. And I would love to receive appropriate compensation for that. That's not greed. That's just fair. I mean, I hate the term fairness, but, you know, I mean, that's reasonable. Greed is saying I want to get, but I don't want to give. Well, that's also, I would argue, that's also laziness, right? You cannot be lazy and run a business. Like, frankly, working at someone else's business and trying to do as little as possible and still get paid, that is a lot more nefarious, greedy, lazy, and selfish than anything you can get away with as a business owner. And by the way, the person you have to be to build teams and to attract high caliber people, those people aren't going to come work for some, you know, the ridiculous thing about the Dr. Evil stereotype is nobody would go work for the guy.
Correct.
He'd be a one-man army because, like, nobody's going to sign up to, I want to go work at Evil Incorporated. Like, you can't attract good people to grow that business.
Yeah. Well, you know, just to reinforce that point, and for the audience, this is my personal story. So when my father started the business, and to fast forward the story, I was forced to work there as a summer job 25, even longer ago. And anyway, I bought the business for $1 because in 2012, he got diagnosed with cancer and suddenly passed. And the business was in about $600,000 debt. And that was made up of a very large AP, not too large, few leases, line of credit, a few other things. And as an entrepreneur, as the business owner, I felt this 1,000% responsibility to go and pay that off, to pay back the line of credit, to pay back all the vendors, not to pay back, to pay off their invoices. And I remortgaged my house. I took money out of the house. For the first 2 years, I didn't take a salary, right? I was just working because it was either do I get paid or do I pay the team? And this was the first 2.5 years of me doing this from 2012 to 2014 and paid it all off. And then someone afterwards said to me, they said, why didn't you bankrupt the business? I said, what do you mean? They said, well, you could have just bankrupted the incorporation. Mm-hmm. I was like, what do you mean? And I was also naive at this point, right? I'm like, wait, I didn't even know that was an option to bankrupt it. And maybe that was sort of, you know, the universe guiding me in the right way. But I was like, even if I did, I don't know if I would, right? Because then all we're going to do is we're going to burn all these relationships. We're going to piss off people. We're going to mess with their money. And I felt this innate responsibility, this parental role that I cannot let these people down. I cannot betray people. I cannot jeopardize these individuals, specifically financially. So for the audience, back to being an entrepreneur, probably one of the most selfless things you could do, because we are always the ones that will eat last, right? I don't know, at least for me, right? I will make sure the entire table is fed. Everyone is sitting down before I get my own plate. And this was even during the pandemic where in 2020, I was 2020, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. March was sitting there and we go to zero in revenue. Okay. We're now coming off one of the best years we've had, and our forecast and what, like, all the work for the years that we've been putting in this business has now hit the wind. We are cruising, and we go to zero. And it was phone call after phone call after phone call. And it was the same call. Hey, Greg, we got to cancel the contract with you because we're not quite sure. Hey, we're pulling everyone out of the training because we're not too sure. And in a heartbeat, that went down. And I looked at the team and I said, we have this much money in the bank account. And if I calculate this right, we could probably run for a year and keep all of us in salary. The only thing we will do is this. If at any point we start to dip in cash flow and the first thing we will do is we'll look at salary reductions, just a little bit. But I'll take the first hit before anyone else does. And then we went out to all our clients and we said, and I also said to them, I commit you, I guarantee you, I promise you, I'll keep all of you employed. I will not terminate anyone for any reasons while we're going through this. So there's my commitment to keep everyone employed. We had so much money in the bank to run for the year. And then we went back to our clients and we said, you know what? Here, let's do the honor system. If you have also lost budgets, no problem, but we are going to continue to do the training. And we're going to do it for free. So we'll still run all the courses. We'll run all the events that we're doing, and we'll do it for free. And the only thing we ask is if you can pay. If you can pay 10%, pay 10%. If you can pay 50%, pay 50%. If you as a business are doing really well and you're manufacturing hand sanitizer, please pay 100%, right? But if not, we are committed back to the purpose of making humans better humans, and running these programs and these training courses and these coaching sessions was more important to us than anything else. And that's in a lot of cases what we did as a community, and it built us. It made us even stronger, but it made the team stronger as well.
Yeah, that's very entrepreneurial. And my guess is that because you kept those relationships intact and active, even there's an inertia where people, they're either in business or they're not in business, and it may have only been at 10% of the contracted rate, but you kept them in business with you, which meant that as things improved, you didn't have to go through, a resubmission process, a reapproval process, a rebudgeting process. You kept it's kind of like saying to your girlfriend or wife, or, well, I guess you wouldn't say your wife, but girlfriend, like, hey, I'm going to be overseas for a year, but like, let's keep the flame lit. Let's just do it long distance on simmer, as opposed to like, let's just cut it off. And then you come back and you don't know what's going to happen. Like, you kept the flame alive. So I'm guessing, fill in the rest of the story, but as things swung back,
we did really well.
Your business came right back.
Yeah, we did the hockey stick, or the V.
Yeah.
But we stayed at zero for a while, right? And as you were saying that, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about the future of like, hey, let's keep these relationships and keep these accounts, and we'll keep them engaged. And yes, that was one of the outcomes to the decision that we made, but that wasn't the reason we did it, right? And I think back to one of the things that maybe we want to point out to the audience or reinforce and just sort of double down on is, as entrepreneurs, we have a huge responsibility, right? Keeping the flame and keeping it going and keeping people engaged. But we also have a responsibility to make sure that we're making the right decisions for the right reasons. And it's an important entrepreneurial trait or again, responsibility. Now, how do we know what is the right decision for the right reasons? I think, there's a little bit of variance to all of that. Mm-hmm. That is really important for us as entrepreneurs. You're gonna end up in times and situations where there might be easier decisions to make, but always ask yourself that question, am I making this decision because it's easy, or am I making the decision because it's the right decision to make?
Yeah, I agree. We teach something in my platform, Entre, where we're essentially installing entrepreneurial values and operating processes and mechanics and principles for people, whether they're starting businesses or, we talk about 4 different ways that people monetize skills in the world. It's either employment, it's freelance work, it's business ownership, or it's investing. And we're agnostic about how people monetize it, but we teach them the skills that allow them to start a business or allow them to do freelance work, allow them to do those things. But as part of this entrepreneurial way of being in the world, we have these 4 entrepreneurial agreements that we sort of commit. We basically say, hey, if you're not willing to commit to these, you're not willing to commit to an entrepreneurial way of being in the world, and we're probably not going to be a fit, right? And it's that they will live with a clear, and we basically have like touched on all of them in this conversation because they're so intrinsic to entrepreneurialism, right? It's living with a clearly defined purpose. It's operating from a defined set of values. It's taking ownership of results in every area of life, and it's giving more than you ask for, right? And that's it. Those are the agreements. You're saying agree to these things, and just agreeing to these things and holding yourself to these standards every day will fundamentally re-architect your entire life if you become, obsessive about it. So I'm curious. Well, so I say that just to kind of put a bow on what you said, that like what you described is extremely congruent with those entrepreneurial agreements, right? Giving more than you ask. Hey, we're going to continue to give 100% of our deliverables, and all we ask for is whatever you can afford. And frankly, you were probably already, if you were doing good business, which I know you do, you were already giving more than you charge, even at full price, right? That's the principle of value, right?
I grew up with this. You always give more, right?
Always, and that's so hard. That's so hard in this world. We live in a world that is so defensive about being taken advantage of. People are scared to give. They've convinced themselves that it's stupid to overgive.
Right.
So let me ask you, we have not all the time in the world, and I want to make sure that we get into your methodology. I've, in studying you as I have, I've been really, a lot of people say, oh, we take a unique psychology-based approach to blank, right? Like that's like become this popular thing. Like we use psychology to help you lose weight and keep it off. We use psychology to help you climb the mountain and not fall in the crevasse. But like you actually use psychology to help people become better humans through business and build better businesses through becoming better humans. But I'm curious, without giving it all away, let's say, first of all, how did you develop or evolve this methodology? And then maybe talk about some of the different ways that it applies or some of the different work you do with people.
All right. So let me start with this. One of the things we've never learned as people, what we've done is we figured out how to navigate relationships just by sort of falling and tripping and doing. And sometimes we get it well, and sometimes we don't. And when we turn to the world of psychology, it really helps us answer 3 really important pieces. Number 1, self-awareness. Who am I? Why do I behave the way I do? Why do I respond the way I do? Why do I communicate, parent, lead the way I do? Where does this whole thing come from? Right? And when I lean into the self-awareness of personality, and one of the models we use is something called the Burns model, which says our personality has a structure to it. There's 3 main areas to it. And something called the parental side to our personality, which is the side of our personality which is comprised of learned behavior. There is what we call the child side of our personality, which by definition is the emotions or the feelings. That's where that comes from. And then we have the adult. And in fact, I usually do this in sessions. I say to the class, I go, how many of you watch Star Trek, right? And a few hands go up, and you get a few peculiar looks across the room saying, well, I don't know if I ever got into it. But Gene Roddenberry, the guy that created Star Trek, studied the Burns model, and he built all of his characters around it. So when we look at those 3 areas of our personality, we actually break them down into subcategories. So our parental state has 2 sides to it. It's a coin, right? There's 2 behaviors there. There's the dominant side, which we traditionally know as the rule, strict, authoritative type of parenting. And by the way, the name parent, adult, and child is not to describe age or status or to say you have kids. We're talking behavior. If I'm like, Jeff, you're a pretty strong critical parent type of personality, and I stop the conversation right here, you go, I know exactly what the guy means. I'm driven, I'm direct, I'm assertive, I'm focused on the outcome, I'm expressive, and so on and so forth. The opposite to that is what we call the nurturing parent. And what we're talking about a lot in entrepreneurship is being selfless and giving like a parent would for their own child. The nurturing parent is you are going to do everything you can to support and give and extend and ensure that that individual grows. The child side to our personality is divided into 3 areas, right? It's a triangle, right? Mm-hmm. We have 3 points of emotion. We have what is known as the most natural side, which is the playful side. We have more of our introverted, withdrawn side, which we might also relate to our survival mechanism, which is flight. And then we've got my favorite, which is the angry child. It's what fuels me. It's what drives me, right? It's the thing I have to manage most. It's my fight, but it's also my tenacity and my grit. Now, what allows us to operate well in our personalities and relationships, back to self-awareness, is what we call the adult, the logical, rational thinking frontal lobe, right? And what do we know about humans? We feel before we think, and most of us don't get to that stage of thinking all that well, because all we're doing is reinforcing that position that we're in from the child, which is, this is what happened and that's why I feel. Now, when we look at leadership, when we look at business owners, when we look at marriages, when we look at actual parenting, the danger in all of this is we are simply reacting, and a lot of us are actually responding from feelings of the past. And it is such an important relationship that we have as business owners and entrepreneurs and leaders, and therefore being able to understand where all this comes from. The second piece to all of this is something called emotional regulation, or affect regulate, AFFECT. I'm going to affect my emotions. And there's a lot of tools that we lean into in our programming around emotional intelligence and emotional management that give us that ability to manage, in quotations, my shit, right? And the third piece to all of this is relational management, which is, can I now deal with your emotions? Can I communicate in a way where I move you? Can I manage the interaction? Now, if you think about this, when you're in an argument with your spouse, it only takes one of you to switch that entire argument, to take it from an argument to a dialogue and a discussion, and then maybe some commitments that we're moving forward. So in the work we do through psychology and through emotional intelligence, is we really address those 3 areas. And Daniel Goleman will also add a 4th and a 5th, but that is the 3 core aspects, once again, to emotional intelligence. If I could demonstrate self-awareness, self-management, and relational management, I'm emotionally intelligent, right? Now, if we think about leaders and business owners and entrepreneurs and parents, who needs to be all of those things? Who needs to be self-aware, self-managed, and relational management more than anyone else? Those roles right there. Mm-hmm. So where did the work come from? There's a few different stories. So my father started the business, and I got involved with it close to 27, 28 years ago. And the reason I stayed in it, by the way, was because I was forced to do one of the interpersonal skills program. And this was, I'm like fresh 20 at this point. It was one of the most life-altering, mind-blowing experiences I had ever gone through, because for the first time I understood. It's like, I get it. And that's where I really doubled down. So the program was originally created by some amazing people. There was a couple clinical psychologists that were the original part of that, brought all these concepts. And then what we did was we tried to take very complicated things and make it simple. And throughout the years, I'll say we've been very blessed with our facilitation team and our coaches and the people that have contributed, because the work we do with the program is a living, breathing document. It's always evolving. The core program is the core program, but we've had amazing, amazing, talented people contribute to this type of learning and the programming that we offer.
Yeah. So how does that show up? Like you have, as I understand it, 6 different, I see on the website, 6 different programs: better human, better leader, better entrepreneur, better executive, better sales, better service. Is that right?
Correct.
So say I come to you, let's say I came to you with my organization. I run a platform. We have about close to 200 person full-time headcount. Mm-hmm. And I want us to all be better humans and build a better business. What do you got for me? Like how does it apply?
So to break it down, with the leadership and the executive team, we would work with you in your programming, and then mid-level managers and team members and high potentials and, individual contributors, we'll work with them through their program in the front line. But what we're going to do in all of those layers is we're literally going to teach what we call the ego states as the foundational concept. And what this now starts to do is it creates a lexicon of language. So it doesn't matter whether you've got the frontline person in a service role all the way to the executive, there is a language, there's like an understanding that comes with these ego states. And for the first time, what you're starting to see is the ability to communicate cross layers, right? Cross departments.
And let me interrupt real quick. Parent, child, adult, those are the three ego states you're talking about?
Those are the three ego states. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and then again, there's the subcategories. And as we get into it, there's assessments, and every personality has a different variance to it, and we have different defaults.
And people move between ego states depending on their self-management and emotional management, right? Like you can get triggered into your angry child ego state, for example.
Exactly. So let's go for something like a simple example. So you got a frontline staff member that has been triggered into their angry child, right? Because of a client interaction. Now, the worst thing we can do is react out of that anger in that fight. So now you got that manager coming over, right? And they want to coach, or they want to, teach the individual. The first thing we're going to begin with, and the advantage that manager has, is the language of the lexicon. Hey, what hooked you? What triggered your angry child in that interaction with that client? Oh, it was this thing right here. Bang. Okay, cool. What would probably be a better approach? Well, what would the adult say in us? Well, okay, let's get that adult activated. All right. When dealing with this angry child, if we were to take a parental approach, which is going to be a better parental approach, to shrink or to deflate that angry child to give him access to the adult, nurturing parent. Cool. Now that manager goes to their leader. Now the leader's role now is to be more of a mentor or coach with that manager, so they're able to be a really strong manager and give this type of advice. So now we're starting to also deepen this level of learning, because the leaders, or that senior leader, is now taking this type of model and applying it to their coaching methodology or their mentoring methodology within that organization. I mean, put it this way. One of our big feathers in the cap clients was the White House. We were the executive coaches and leadership trainer for 8 years through the Obama administration. We ran our programs, leadership and service, throughout the entire organization. And what started to happen was people started to use this language. And if you've ever worked in government, it's not always the warmest place, right? It's not always fun, right? But you're now starting to give people access. And I think some of the greatest work that we do is people have these moments where they're like, oh, I get it. I get why my 17-year-old and I are having like such tough times in our conversation. I think very simply what we do as an organization is we teach people how to deal with people, right? We teach you how to communicate. Simple.
Well, I think what I appreciate so much, and I didn't know the specifics or the intricacies of your process, and obviously I still don't. I mean, that was, you just skimmed the surface. But what I did know about it is that helping people operate better within business, like you said, is fundamentally about helping them get better at dealing with people. And that doesn't just help them operate better in business. Like you said, it makes a better world. It makes better humans, not just better business people, right? And this is where I sort of, to kind of circle all the way back to where we started, where I believe that, and I think I probably do agree with you to some degree, that not everybody needs to be a business owner per se. It's either, for some, it's not the right time or circumstance, and for others, you're right, it's probably not super aligned with their natural gifts. But there is an entrepreneurial way of being that is the essence of what is needed in great business, and that is, I believe, also reflective of the healthy, more sort of stakeholder-minded form of capitalism. So we're sort of weaving all these themes together, but it's really just about being better people. It really is. And that's where when I make the comment of like, everybody should be trying to get better in business, just like everybody should be trying to get better in health. Because feeling better because you're healthy and being better with people because you're better in business is probably going to make you a lot nicer person to live with, and a better spouse, and a better parent, or a better child, or a better brother or sister, right? So I appreciate so much of what you do, and I always say that all professional development should be an extension of personal development.
Yeah. Do you know what our company name was? The first name that we ended up changing because we had such a tough time selling it corporately. The name of the company was called the Personal Development Institute. And For a long time, I've thought about what would it look like for us to rebrand or bring that name back.
Yeah.
Personal Development Institute, because what a powerful name that today, in today's world in 2023, personal development, personal growth, it's sexy. Thought leadership is sexy. People are into this. In 1987, 88, 89, early 90s, try to go to a company and say, hey, by the way, so we do personal development. And they went, no, we need management training. And then what we did was we said, fuck it. All right, we'll call it management training. And we would go in these rooms and people would be like, this feels like therapy. This feels like more like personal development. Yes. How's it going? Man, my relationship with my spouse it's taken this new level on it. In fact, can my spouse come and do the program? Sure. We've got this other program for her. Or him. Or, you know what? My kid's 16. When they're 21 or 22, I want them to come and do this program. And I cannot tell you how many times we get that phone call where someone will be like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in one of your programs 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We also offer something called Freepeat, which is once you've done a program with us, you could come and repeat the course with us for the rest of your life. We literally have people coming back 15, 20 years later and redoing the programs again. And the most amazing thing is how much they remember. Mm-hmm. Like the concepts, and they still apply them, and it's become part of their toolkit, which is what they use to be successful as people. So, yeah, I think business is amazing opportunity for us to grow as people.
Yeah, it's funny because my platform is Entre Institute, and I've been saying it almost from day one that starting a business or making more money or professional upskilling or whatever people are trying to do is our Trojan horse, so that we can get into the walls of their life and release all the personal growth that we know is what not only we say, oh, well, that's what you need. It's also what's going to get them the result that they want of making more money or scaling a business or whatever it is. So, man, just so like-minded here with you, and I appreciate what you do. Great segue. We're about out of time, but also you've just set up, I think, a really, really great picture of the work that you do. How can people go find out either more about the work you do through your organization, you personally, follow you socially, like whatever you have out there for people?
Yeah, awesome. So the main website is witzeducation.com. Super easy. WITZ education.com. It's got all of our organizational offerings and programs and services there, broken down very specifically in regard to like what we cover each day and what it's going to look like. Because sometimes it's kind of hard signing up for programs because it's a little bit like the abyss. You get the title of it, but you don't really get the guts of it. So we're really, really specific about making sure that we get that out. For the audience, if they want to download another podcast, that's where you and I met. So my podcast is called Better Human Podcast, and it's to speak to guys like you, Jeff, and getting you to share your knowledge and tips and thoughts and advice, all to just be better humans. And then socially, I'm super easy to find. Greg Witz, GregWitz, and I will pop up. And whether it's on Insta or TikTok or Facebook or LinkedIn, I'm sure there's a couple other ones, Clubhouse, right? They're all there, but come and join. We put out content every day. And again, it's just in the exercise of always creating great thought leadership and just sharing as much knowledge as we can.
And if you're not seeing this on YouTube, you can't see his hat, making humans better humans.
Yeah. And listen, just to the audience, thank you, Jeff, because what you do with your show and your company, you are the definition of a teacher, and the world needs more teachers. And one of the greatest things we can do in this world is teach. And we teach by role modeling, we teach by doing, and we teach by making decisions. And we need more of us out there. So thank you for all you do, man.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
What's the difference between winning and losing? What's the separator between success and failure? What's the separator between being happy and sad? I believe it's one more. You're one decision away from changing your life. You are much closer than you think that you're one away.